Hi, everybody. Welcome to our special edition, recruiting edition, Swampcast. I'm Robbie Andreu, and with me is Edward Aschoff, who has done such a great job covering recruiting for the Gainesville Sun and Gatorsports.com. And Edward, the big day is getting here. What do you expect to play? How is it going to play out tomorrow for Florida?
I think that all the drama and the excitement's over at this point. I mean, they've already locked up 25 guys, and I still think they're just going to get 28. So tomorrow won't be as exciting as maybe years past. You don't have a massive amount of kids that you're thinking might decommit, or are the top players still going to come here? They've gotten the top players already. So I imagine probably 3 kids that they'll probably grab, and no one really surprising tomorrow.
Who do you think comes on board tomorrow, Edward? I know you have a good idea there. Who do you think
will
finish the class?
They've wanted another linebacker, another receiver, and another offensive lineman. So I think they're going to get all 3. Chaz Green from Tampa Catholic is at the top of my list to commit. He's scheduled to commit late in the afternoon, so he might not be the first guy, but I still have my money on him. Adrian Coxon out of Baltimore, Maryland. He's a receiver that was committed to Penn State. Florida came on late. Georgia and Notre Dame are up there, but from what I've heard, Florida's on top, so expect a commitment out of him in the morning. And then I'm going to go with Darren Kitchens. Came on late, the Homestead linebacker. Not a lot of people talked about him early. It kind of overshadowed down in South Florida, but, you know, I heard the staff got his tape, and they really liked him. And
I can see why. You look at that tape, he's
so athletic.
For touchdowns.
He's kind of like a mini Carlos Dunlap in high school. But, you know, a lot of people talked about Christian Jones and Jordan Hicks. I mean, he's obviously going to Texas. But this was a guy that once I saw that he was getting on board, maybe a backup plan, but he might be a guy that wasn't really a backup plan with as athletic he is.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you look at the tape of him, he's a real good athlete. And all 3 of those guys fill a need. So this just kind of completes a great recruiting class. And this is one that Meyer's been working on for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
He develops relationships. This goes back for 2 years, and the commitments started coming like a year ago. So this has been a class that's unfolded over time, and there's been no late drama. And I don't, like you said, I don't expect any tomorrow.
Yeah, it should just be as unexciting as it will be. It'll be an extremely exciting class. I mean, this could be one of the greatest ever in Florida history. I mean, defensively, they're just loaded. I mean, Ronald Powell, Sharif Floyd, Dominic Easley, Lyndon Trail. I mean, that's a defensive line that anybody in the country would want.
Edward, talk about Powell. This is an interesting guy. He's a 5-star guy, Rivals Player of the Year. And you've seen this guy live a few times. You've seen him work out. You've seen a bunch of other prospects. Where does he rate among the players you've seen out there?
Of all the high school kids I've ever seen, he's the most athletic. I mean, he's a tight end, defensive end, linebacker. He could play really any position. And I even saw him throwing with some of the coaches over summer during the camps, and he looked like he could even play quarterback. But he's just so athletic. This summer when I saw him, he was working out at tight end and burning corners, burning safeties, you know, making high-flying catches. And then you put him at defensive end, and he's just getting past everybody. I mean, he's so fast off the line, and he gained a lot of weight during the season, and he just looked awesome at the Army game. And you saw MVP performance. He gets a touchdown at tight end.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think he had a couple sacks, and he gets that extra point return for 2 points. So I think he's the guy that could come in and just make an immediate impact.
Edward, this is a player of the year in the country. He's like an hour away from Southern Cal. He wants to play in the SEC. Could you just talk about the fact that the relationship he got with Meyer, I guess the way it stayed together, even when Meyer's status was a little bit uncertain there?
Yeah, I think that was the main thing for him. Just the relationship that they built was just so special. And I know that he and Pete Carroll were close, but he and Meyer were just absolutely inseparable. They were always talking. As much as Meyer could call, he was picking up. I mean, these two are just, joined at the hip, and they're thousands of miles away. So, and I think that what happened is once the Meyer issue came out about his health, that was the big thing. If Meyer wasn't returning, I doubt we'd see Ronald Powell in this class. USC probably would have gotten him, even if Lane Kiffin had come in anyway. It was just the power that they had together. I think that these two have just such a special bond. I don't want to say it might be Tim Tebow-like, but it's pretty close to that.
But he looks like a Tebow-type guy as far as the impact he could make. And Meyer, it's all about building relationships with these kids. He doesn't just come in late. This is a process that goes on for a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Meyer is the closer, the guy that gets that relationship going between the players in Florida. And what do you think Meyer did when, I guess at the end there when he was supposedly going to leave absence, but he never really wasn't? Well, you talked to the recruits, how involved was Meyer here over the last 4 weeks?
Well, I know that he was making phone calls as much as he could. And when you go back to relationships, you just look at Matt Elam. I mean, mid-'90s, he knew Matt Elam, and they had such a strong relationship. He was one of the first commits in this class. And when all that happened, his world was just turned upside down. And you could just see the power and the relationships that Meyer makes with that. And I think what he did was he probably took some time to step away and, clear his head, and then he was making the right phone calls. it all depends on what you're saying, what you're telling the parents, as honest as you can be. And I wrote that if he wasn't honest with these guys, it would just destroy this class.
It would have blown it up, I guess.
Yeah, I said if he wasn't going to come back, it's better to let the recruits know now, lose the guys you're going to lose, and pick up in the next couple of months, rebuild in 2011. If he had flat out lied to him and said he's coming back and then he doesn't, what happens to these 2010 kids? In 2011, you lose all your trust.
Oh, you do.
So,
it's out the window. You're right. He isn't just blowing smoke here with this. I'm coming back.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he too much is on the line. But Edward, at the Sugar Bowl, when all this was happening, he resigned. He's coming back. He's taking a leave of absence. At that point, it looked like Florida's recruiting could fall apart.
Oh, yeah.
Then the day after the Sugar Bowl, the Under Armour game in Orlando, or St. Pete, explain how that happened.
Again, it just depends on what Meyer's telling these kids. And at the same time, they lose Billy Gonzalez, who's one of their top recruiters outside of Meyer. They just lost Charlie Strong, one of the top defensive coordinators.
Vance Bedford.
Vance Bedford leaves. The thing is you get Chris Dunkley, who's one of the top receivers in Florida, one of the top receivers in the country. And then Dominic Easley comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, that would stun me. Florida. I go, who's Dominic Easley? I'd forgotten about him because he was off the radar there for a while.
He was a kid who wanted to commit in July, and things just didn't work out for him. So when Dominic Easley committed, that's when I really thought, okay, there's no lying on this. Meyer's definitely coming back. Because why would a kid just automatically just randomly commit to a school like this?
Yeah, and then you get guys like Sharif Floyd jumping on board, guys from Philadelphia, wants to come to Florida, wants to play for Meyer. So the power of Meyer has been incredible with this recruiting class.
I don't think I've seen a coach develop these kind of relationships before in recruiting.
And when you look at that, all the coaches leaving, the uncertainty about Meyer, given that, is this going to be the best recruiting job in the country by anybody by far, do you think?
Yeah, if there was a recruiting award for coaches, Meyer would definitely get it. I mean, you go from I'm done to, okay, I'm coming back. I mean, that waffling, the trust is almost gone. And the things he did is 7 days, he got 5 of the top players in the country. They all committed on national television. I mean, that's huge. And the fact that they didn't lose anybody until late when, they pretty much told Dorsey, if you're going to keep, messing with us,
you're not committed.
We don't need you. So they really didn't lose anyone this whole year. I mean, they had a deflection early, but, off the field troubles with Victor Hampton. Still, the job that Meyer's done, losing all these coaches, all the hype surrounding the program. Let's think all these kids were thinking we're going into the defending national championship program potentially. They lose to Alabama. You could say that could have been a huge impact on recruiting as well, and it really did.
Yeah, it really wasn't. And to me, Edward, this is going to continue.
Oh, yeah.
He's the best recruiter I've ever been around, and he is already working guys that are sophomores, juniors now, and they're already setting up for 2011. So that's the way Meyer does it.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. He's already talking to kids. But James Wilder's a guy that a lot of people are going to talk about next year. He could play linebacker or running back. The types of guys that he's talking to are your top ones. It's not these regular players. He knows what he wants. He wants the big fish, and he's going to get them.
Yeah, and the old days, recruiting would begin at the end of the season almost, and now it's a year-long process, as you know, because you've been writing about guys committing since a year ago or so. So
it's amazing. To think that with all the stress that's going on, you have to deal with a team that's trying to win a national championship. Then you have to talk to kids that are already committed, kids that aren't committed, and then you already have to look into the future. You're calling quarterbacks in 2011, cornerbacks, and all this. I don't know how I can manage my time.
But now we all know the names now for 2011. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So everybody's getting a jump on recruiting, which is good and keeps people interested.
Exactly.
But Edward, if you look at this, what are the strengths of this recruiting class? We've mentioned Powell on the defensive line. Is that the strength right there?
I think the defensive line is probably the strongest defensive line ever recruited. You have Sharif Floyd and Dominic Easley, who I think will play inside. That's dominant right there. Even if they go to the 3-4, you're putting them both in at nose. Ronald Powell's a guy who could stand up in a 3-4, play off the edge. I really like Lyndon Trail. He got a lot of attention early, but it kind of died off once, Easley and Floyd and Powell all committed. But he's a really fast guy who's got some room to grow. So he might not be as big or maybe as talented as Ronald Powell, but he's going to be fast off the line, and he's a guy that is really going to perform well.
Yeah, and he was a hot prospect back in the summer. And when guys like that commit early, a lot of times people forget about it. But you're right, guys like that, and Quentin Dunbar from the same school, and those are guys from Miami. Talk about the fact that Meyer is getting deeper into South Florida every year, and now he's getting into California a little bit. Could you just talk about the presence now in South Florida that Florida has?
Well, the surprising thing is, when Doc Holliday left, everybody said, "Oh, South Florida, you got to keep going." And I mean, honestly, Meyer hasn't had the success that maybe he's wanted there.
Yeah.
I mean, you get a Deontay Thompson, Janoris Jenkins, but these are guys once a year. This year, Chris Dunkley out of Pahokee, pretty much everyone from Dwyer. Three guys from there.
Which is a great haul, and they're guys for next year.
Yeah,
so.
they're top players. And then Lyndon Trail and Quentin Dunbar, and if they get Darren Kitchens from Homestead, I mean, Florida's done a really good job in South Florida. I don't think they're getting the credit they deserve this year, but that's top players right there coming out of one of the top prospect yielding parts of the country.
Yeah.
You look at California, they made a play on a lot of guys. I mean, usually Meyer doesn't go out to places where he knows he can't recruit. And, you get Ronald Powell. They made a play for Kenny Stills, and it came down to the wire between them and Oklahoma. Josh Shaw, who I think is one of the top corner prospects in the country.
Could be a starter.
I think he will be
this spring. So.
He should start opposite Janoris Jenkins in my book. But they went out there. Dietrich Riley was a guy that they were big on. George Jefferson, a running back out there. It's just really amazing how they stretch the field. I mean, then they go up to Philadelphia and they get guys. I mean, they're going all across the country.
Yeah.
They're not just recruiting in Florida.
Yeah, and I know they're not going to get Henderson from Minnesota, but they're in it with him, which tells you how national they've gone with this.
Exactly.
And then you look at South Florida again. Quentin Dunbar was a Miami commitment. He backed out going to Florida. You just don't see that. Haven't seen that over the years.
No.
So that's a big thing. Kids down there want to play for Florida. They're not afraid to pull the trigger now.
Yeah, and especially with Dunbar, Miami made a huge play for him late, and he said, "No, I want to be a Gator." So that's stuff you wouldn't see a few years ago.
Edward, we talked earlier about a possible maybe a hole in the class that keeps it from being maybe the best ever.
Mm-hmm.
The impact Percy Harvin type offensive player. Do you think that that's the one thing the recruiting analysts will look at and say, well, they didn't quite get the guys they're looking for on offense?
Yeah, I still think this is the number one class in the country and one of the greatest classes of all time. But when you look at it, just take out what Tim Tebow, Brandon Spikes, and Percy Harvin did after the 2006 season. The way that Florida was able to get one of the top quarterbacks, the top linebacker, and the top wide receiver, I mean, that's huge. And when you look at, molding the class all the way around, they really stress defense. And you can't take that away from Florida. That's what they needed. So it's not to say that the class isn't great, but I still think that without a marquee, running back in there, I mean, Mac Brown is good, but injured his hamstring all year, so we don't know the full potential of him. Chris Dunkley's great, but he's not quite a Percy Harvin, maybe not even Andreu DeBose. So the quarterback issue, Tyler Murphy and Trey Burton are still works in progress. It's still a great class, but I think without those three elements, it won't go beyond the 2006's greatest ever.
And, like you said, when there's openings on defense, that's when you get the impact players.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have that on offense this year, really. I mean, DeBose is in there. They're still okay.
Mm-hmm.
The running back thing, Mac Brown, it looked like he wavered back and forth, but I guess he was pretty solid throughout, from what I'm understanding.
Yeah, Stan Drayton made a huge impact on him late. And I know I talked to him, and Mac Brown's always been really honest with me, and he said, I was really confused when Kenny Carter left. It was something he didn't expect.
Yeah.
And he was really unsure about Stan Drayton, hadn't heard a lot about him, and when he came in, he just fell back in love with Florida. And I mean, there was a lot of talk. Was he going to go to FSU for a visit? Georgia was trying to get involved again, but Tennessee, even without Lane Kiffin, was pressing hard. But I think it was really the relationship he developed with Stan Drayton. That really helped at the end.
Edward, you mentioned Murray is at the quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
the late commitment. He was on nobody's radar, but you look at tape of him, he looked like an incredible athlete. I know the competition wasn't that great, but what do you think of this kid, and is he a legitimate prospect for playing quarterback at Florida somewhere in the future?
Well, the first thing I noticed about him was when I talked to him, calm as can be. I mean, this is a kid that was committed to Temple. They're known more for basketball than football.
Even though they did get to a bowl game
They
this year,
did get
so
to a bowl game.
They're moving on.
But he goes from being committed January 1st to Temple to getting an offer from Steve Adazio and Scott Leffler at Florida. So he was as calm about it as he could be. He said, I'm excited, but, I still have to work. And the first thing he told me was, my balance in the pocket is something that I have to work on. I have to work on my throwing. But he's one of those guys that if you could put an arm on him, he could be just a dynamic player, especially in this type of offense.
So he's got it up on it.
Oh, yeah.
He's the mind to play the game.
He's pretty much a wildcat quarterback that can throw. So we'll see what happens with him and Trey Burton. I mean, if Jordan Reed going to play quarterback this spring, or is he going to move to tight end? Yeah. So it'll be really important how Trey Burton and Tyler Murphy do this summer. And Trey Burton, this spring, since he'll be here.
How big is it for Trey Burton to be here in the spring? I mean, obviously he needs work on mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great runner, it looks like, but throwing, he's not, prototypical. But how big was he in recruiting as far as recruiting some of these kids to come here?
He was huge in recruiting. Mac Brown, they developed a great relationship. I mean, he told me they were best friends in this recruiting process. So I think he had a huge impact on guys. He was always calling kids. He was talking to Chris Dunkley a lot. He and Ian Silverman just did a great job recruiting when the coaches couldn't. But getting him here in spring practice is huge. Like you said, the mechanics are a little off.
Yeah.
And he's even said that. He said the number one thing is my throwing motion, gripping the ball and, staying high and tight. It's a problem that he has, and he says this is the perfect time to develop it. He's going to get bigger and stronger. He's going to work with Scott Leffler a little more. He's going to have time to throw to guys. So of all the prospects, I think spring was the biggest thing for Trey Burton.
And he obviously has an upside and can fit in this offense.
Yeah. He's a track star. He's the anchor for his track team in high school. So,
well, we've done a great job on recruiting. We're not done yet. We've got National Signing Day tomorrow, so we'll have all kinds of stuff posted throughout the day.
Yeah, it should be exciting.
But I think we'll probably have another webcast maybe tomorrow or the next day about recruiting. But this is Robbie and Edward Aschoff saying so long, and we'll talk to you again soon recruiting.